Hey, what are you working on?
Oh, hey. My next video.
Oh yeah? What's it about?
Well, I'm doing a video on why you should be buying EURORACK modules.
Wait, what? You just did a video on why we shouldn't be buying any more EURORACK modules.
I'm striving for a balanced perspective on my channel.
Ooh, doesn't mean we can buy more modules?
I mentioned before that there are many reasons why you probably shouldn't be getting into EURORACK modules. First, they are deceptively expensive. You start out with a module here and there, but the next thing you know, you're in for some serious money. EURORACK modules can also be quite the huge time sink. And I'm not talking about the fun part where we lose track of time. I've certainly spent hours tweaking just one base patch. No, it's the amount of time it takes just getting up to speed, even for experienced modular heads. But despite all these pain points, if you love music and music technology, getting into EURORACK modules may be the best thing you ever did. Okay, so I've been working on this orchestral theme for some time now and felt that I was, again, going through the same motions and kind of stuck in this rut. So I thought, what a perfect way for me to test drive my new sampler skiff by recording some of these riffs and tracking them and loading them all up onto the Bitbox and see what kind of creative spark that I could get going. The most important modules to remember here is the Nebulae by Qubit, the Arbhar by Instruo, and the Bitbox Micro by 10 Time Music. And this is still a work in progress, but the idea for here was, if I do get stuck in a rut with some theme, maybe I can leverage all the power of the modular synth world, especially their granular synthesizers and their samplers, and just find ways to have them interact in ways that I would not normally think of. So this wouldn't be the kind of thing that you would incorporate it into some final production process because it's too volatile and it tends to be a little bit too random. But as a scratch pad, as a notepad, it's, I think, brilliant. I loaded up this string bass on this particular channel here on the Nebulae Qubit. So I'm just going to play that. So it's just a bow string, right? But to make it interesting, because the granular synths are so good at creating energy and excitement, maybe I can I could make the overlap a little bit big. Create some kind of a movement, right? Again, it's acoustic, but it's kind of synthetic. So for me, I remember hearing this on the GR1 and I thought, that's cool. I want to explore that more. But again, still in a development phase and exploration phase, but great. And also, by the way, Nebula, Qubit, it just sounds really good. So I've got that going. And now what I did was on the, let me just mute that. And then on the Arbhar, in my previous video, I really dug down to some of the great things that I thought Instruo would, the Arbhar would work really well. And it's like this granular sandwich, as it were. And so if I unmute this, because it's got that 6 different layers. And so I loaded up just these themes on these 7 channels. And already it's sounding, I dialed some of these settings in. It's just, I don't know, man. It's super cool already. And I've got the actual, and I'll mute that. And then I've got, this guy. And I got the actual samples of all the thematic ideas that I've been kind of toying around with in there. And so if you unmute all of it, now I've got this little playground that I can just kind of start to riff on. And already I'm digging it. And if I get bored, I just like, boom, that little French horn call. And this little, my favorite chord, which is the augmented fifth. Now some may say, well, isn't this just like a sample playback from a notepad, like an Akai MPC? Like, yes and no, because eventually I could explore further and begin to start using some of these modulators and these oscillators and other kinds of VCAs to start automate some of these processes. And you could do that anywhere. I mean, you could do that in Ableton or any other form factor, but in this particular case, the skiff is just so much cooler, And I can bring that B section in. I mean, I guess, it doesn't matter, I guess, whether this sounds cool to you guys or not. For me, this is just absolutely amazing sounding. Like, I love this. It just makes, I thought these themes were so kind of like, just whatever, I wasn't really excited about it. But when I put it in here, it started to validate some of the strengths. It also I can quickly think about ways in which those themes work together well, and other themes that, I'm gonna mute this here, other themes that are not as strong. See that? And so you begin to like really riff much, much quicker and kind of abandon ideas that you don't like. But more importantly, I found that you just get back a little more confidence in your work, because you're seeing it's almost like having a second person come in. Oh, here, let me take those samples and let me kind of like rearrange it this way. Is that what you were thinking? And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, Because when you're in your own work path and you're doing your own thing, you get so self-conscious and you kind of feel like your worst critic, and you get stuck in that rut. But this particular skiff, this particular setup, and the way modular synthesis works, it's like having another person there kind of doing some stuff and then reflecting it back to you without literally having somebody to do that. So when I hear this, and this sounds huge too. There's like no processing. There's a little bit of like software compressor on it, but I mean, some of these can be directly imported into like pretty pro level kind of soundtracks, I think, and just such a weird way to work. And again, I've worked with samplers before, but not in this way, because this is just scratching the surface, right? Once I get the modular like elements with the oscillators and modulators and automation and LFOs going, it's gonna just be insane. And I haven't even done any modulation really, but if you were to start hearing the weird you just go into kind of weird horror mode. And you can also like freeze it and do weird stuff to it. You can get really glitchy. Whoa. Yeah, there's this little thing you can do with the Arbhar where it takes the pitch and has this really musical wave shaping capability. Whoa. That's the French horn. And then you just kind of ground everything into that chord structure. Yeah, pretty rejuvenative, and it really gives you confidence back in your work. I mean, not every modular session ends up with usable materials, and I'm certainly not suggesting that the EURORACK modules are somehow superior to other creative workflows. But modules, because it breaks down audio at a fundamental level, with sine waves and voltage controls, with physical and tactile engagement, it really does give you a unique look for your creative process. Okay, so here is a quick example of when I was working on this particular task. The EURORACK module had an entirely different idea of its own and took me to a whole different path, and I was better for it. So this is my groove box. I've been working on this for some time, and a few weeks ago I think I mentioned how, here, let me just play this real quick. How I was working with chants, and by tweaking this little rhythm knob, I can introduce complexity, right? Here, and I can isolate that further. So the point here was I wanted to give that little pluck synth sound a little more character. So I have this echoes module from Tip Top Audio, and I thought maybe I can add a bit of that tape delay effect, which I adore, and add it on top of the synth sound. Well, when I did that, and I won't show you here, it was kind of a disaster. And the reason why it was a disaster, I think, was that these Groovebox percussion are all monophonic, and they have a very specific kind of really rigid stereo field. They kind of have it's just all mono. So when I added that tape delay effect, it had this weird, it didn't sound as punchy, and it just seemed out of place. It was a disaster. So I'm like, well, that's annoying. But I didn't want to give up there. So I thought, well, let me just dial this patch in a little bit more, and maybe I can find a way to, I don't know, tweak it in some way where it won't sound so muddy and kind of lose all the edge. And so I had this MCO, which is another, pretty basic, your classic oscillator module, a starter module. And so I plugged this in, and I started to kind of figure out what other things I could do. And as I was experimenting, I started to note it would just I started to get this really interesting, almost like this weird alien kind of vibe to it. And again, it's just I think it's just a sawtooth. This little knob changes the wavetable. It's a digital oscillator, if I'm not mistaken. And so a lot like Platts. And but it had the sound. It has the sound of one of those Cloverfield movies, what? And so I just had a blast, just doing this for 30 minutes. So that's modular synth for you, you're working on some drum beat, and the next thing you know, you're making these weird textures, or at least experimenting with them and filing those little nuggets away for later use. Concepts of modular synthesis are really just like the Lego-y building blocks for audio. So in theory, it should have the broadest appeal. But there's some work to be done in terms of inclusion, accessibility, affordability, and usability. So I hope to do my small part through my channel, and I will see you guys next time.